Cheers, everybody. Good morning. Welcome to Hopefully Here. I am Hope, and I am obviously super thrilled that you clicked on this video. I am going to start doing maybe a little experiment because I'm going to start reading books from specific small presses, just as a way to broaden my horizons and see what else is out there. Now, the one that I'm starting with is Arsenal Pulp Press, and it is located in Chinatown in Vancouver, British Columbia, up in Canada. I live in Washington, and so some of these books I find with the Canadian small presses can be a little bit more challenging to get a hold of because they aren't necessarily down here. My libraries don't have them. The Seattle library actually has quite a few, but the Seattle library is dealing with a cybersecurity issue right now, which means I can't access anything electronically. So I have done what I can. I think I have 5 books from this press, and I think I have about 2 or 3 more coming to me. We'll see. I'm obviously not going to get to all of them in this video. There's just not enough time, but I just thought it would be a really interesting little experiment to start maybe figuring out small presses that are worth my time. Now, this one particularly caught my attention because it is what published Scarborough by Catherine Hernandez, which I know I go on a lot about. I feel like I've mentioned it in every video in the last little bit, but was one of my favorite books of the year last year, and decided to see what else they had. They've also published Butter Honey Pig Bread, which is a book that I really enjoyed, and they published Shut Up You're Pretty, which was put up for Canada Reads this year, another book that I read. It wasn't my favorite, but the writing was still spectacular. And there definitely seems to be a theme with this press. They're very, very focused on diversity and making sure that their literature that they're putting out is really asking important questions. They say in their thing that they want to produce work that engages and challenges readers and asks probing questions about the world around them. When you go to their submission guidelines, it's very much about, they're really looking for books that represent BIPOC authors and stories, and also LGBTQ2S+. Is that what the acronym is now? 2S+ authors and stories as well. So very much focused on that. They also want to focus on regional work, which is the British Columbia area. Obviously, Washington shares a border with British Columbia, so kind of relevant as well. And it just seems like it was a good place for me to start. So the 2 books that I have physically with me right now are My Volcano by John Elizabeth Dinsey, and The Mercy Journals by Claudia Casper. So The Mercy Journals is a post-World War III book, I apologize, and it's about, there's a lot of climate destruction, and you're following this character, Mercy, and he finds out that his kids are alive somewhere. His brother finds him and says, your kids are alive, and they have to go searching for his kids. I think there's more to it than that. The synopsis is a lot longer, but I'm not going to read you the synopsis. We'll talk about the book as I go through it. But this could be interesting. Now, like I said, for a lot of these, I kind of just had to grab which books I could get. I don't always love climate change books, only because sometimes they hit a little too close to home. But when the writing is done well and the story is done well, I can still obviously enjoy those books. So very much looking forward to that. Fairly short read, should be good. And then My Volcano. This seems crazy. So actually what you'll notice is that this is actually been published by $2 Radio. In Canada, this book has been published by Arsenal Pulp Press. In America, it's been published by this publishing house. This is what I could get my hands on, so this is what we're going with. But just know that in Canada, it is Arsenal Pulp Press that publishes this book with a different cover, obviously. And this is about, there seem to be a whole ton of storylines in this one, because a volcano has started to grow just outside of New York City, and it's got, I don't know, you're following an 8-year-old boy, you're following a Nigerian scholar, you're following a trans writer in Jersey City, you're following somebody in Afghanistan. Like, there just seem to be a whole lot of people, and I'm not really sure where the story is going to go, but I am very much looking forward to it. This book was a Kirkus Reviews Best Fiction Book of the Year book. So I've heard about this one previously, but I haven't read it yet. So we're going to have a good time with that one. I also have a book called There Has to Be a Knife by Adnan Khan, and this is a debut book, and it deals with race and masculinity and relationships, and it has a very interesting sort of premise, but the one thing that really grabbed my attention was it says in the blurb for fans of the book Scarborough by Catherine Hernandez. And as I said, I love that book, so that one was definitely put on the TBR, and I have that in e-form. I think it's also a pretty short book. Everything is Awful and You're a Terrible Person by Daniel Zamparelli, and this actually has quite a few accolades. It is a Relit Award winner and an Ethel Wilson Fiction Prize finalist. So it's definitely got some backing up in terms of the credibility, in terms of how great the book is. I'm looking forward to reading this one. It is a bunch of interconnected stories, and the little thing that they say about it, and I'm going to read it because I think it's kind of funny. It's a deadpan, tragicomic exploration of love, desire, and dysfunction. And that sounds intriguing because I think what I saw in part of the blurb was you're following like a YouTuber who's documenting his breakup, and a couple who wants to open up their relationship to a ghost, and something about a lactose intolerant person who's worried somebody shouted "nice shorts bro" to them on the street, and they're all anxious about it and stuff. So it seems like it could be a quirky little read, and I am looking forward to that one as well. Okay, and the final book I have with me now in e-form is Crossings by Betty Lambert. So this book was originally published in 1979. It has been out of print for 20 years before it was republished by Arsenal Pulp Press. And it's actually a book that when it came out was banned by some feminist bookstores because I guess the content on it. And you're following a woman named Vicky who is intelligent and really educated, and she's kind of trying to navigate life in terms of getting to know herself and navigate an abusive relationship that she's in. That's all I got, but I think it's kind of interesting that this is a story that's obviously compelled these publishers to reprint a book that's been out of print for 20 years, which makes me really intrigued as to what kind of storytelling we're going to get. And I guess it's the only book this author has ever written. Those are the 5 books we're going to start with. I will talk about the other ones as they come in, if they come in time, but I'm really looking forward to this book, to these books. It's like I said, a small print. They have about 400 titles, just over 400 titles in print right now. They do between 15 and 20 new prints a year and between 25 and 30 reprints each year. There's only 7 members of the staff, so it is a legitimately small press, but they've definitely had some pretty big hitting books, and I am really excited to hopefully find a couple new ones. That is the plan. It is, what time is it? By the way, how great is this mug? I love this mug so much. It is 10:15 on Tuesday morning. I have one more shift this week. I think we're just gonna sit down and read. I've actually been in the mood to read, which makes me very happy. The hockey season finished last night, so I don't even have hockey to distract me anymore. It's warm. Maybe we'll get outside at some point. But yeah, for now, let's drink the coffee and start with, I think we're gonna start with the Mercy Journals, and we'll go from there. Well, why don't you join me? Grab a drink, pull up a chair, hit that subscribe button, like button while you're at it. Let's do some reading. made it to Journal 2. You learn in the first page, I think, that this book is essentially broken up into 2 journals. And it's these 2 journals that have been discovered, and so you're kind of going back in time, but you're following the perspective of Alan, or whose nickname is Mercy, which he got when he was with the military. And he's by himself and very clearly going through a lot of PTSD and trauma and dealing with the repercussions of his time with the army that very much shape the way his life is at the time that you're reading it. And you're following this story. And so it's kind of, I guess in terms of, like, it's kind of a quiet dystopian story, like a quiet end of the world story, in that you're not sure if the world is actually going to come to an end because things are bad. The climate crisis has taken over, has destroyed everything. It's challenging, but it's not impossible to get by, and things are still happening. Like, he's in a relationship with this woman, Ruby, who's a dancer. So theater is still kind of happening, but you know that there's this backdrop of these really awful things, and 2/3 of the population have been killed off. It's terrible, but people are still living and moving forward. So it's not as bleak as a lot of climate crisis dystopian books are, but it's not happy, but it's not as dire. So it's kind of a quiet backdrop, and it really is more about the story of this man, Mercy. And in book 2, I think, is when we're going to get to his searching for his kids, because he has a very estranged relationship from them. He doesn't really know where they are. They are adults, so it's not like they're not children anymore. But it's really interesting. I think the way the writer is getting into this man's head and writing that is really great. His voice is very clear and very unique. The storytelling is done really well. I'm quite enjoying it. It's an easier read. I wouldn't call it light, and I think that there's some pretty heavy content, but it is easy to read, and I am appreciating that quite a bit. Definitely having a good time. So there's a quote on the back, and it is, "The Mercy Journals takes current concerns, global warming, PTSD, anti-immigration policies, war, and weaves them seamlessly into a gripping and mysterious plot set in the future world that, like any excellent sci-fi, is really about today." And I think you can see that really well. It's not, I find with some books, you really have to kind of search for the subliminal undertones, the subliminal meanings. And while this isn't, knocking you over the head with anything, it's not hiding anything either. Really, really enjoying it. And I hope to finish the next little bit in the next hour or so. I think I have about 70 pages left or so. I will drink my almond milk cold iced coffee, and I will read my book, and I will get back to you when I'm done. Okay, done. And clearly it read really quickly because I'm not even finished my drink yet. But the second half of this book, the pacing really changes in a really great way. And I don't want to say too much. I don't want to give it away because it does kind of start to go a little bit more into, I wouldn't say thriller territory, but the pacing of it makes it seem a little bit more frantic than it is, and you move really quickly and then it slows down a little bit, and you move really quickly and it slows down. And the second half is not at all what I was expecting it to be. I really enjoyed this book. I enjoyed this a lot. It's similar sort of vibes to Moon of the Crusted Snow by Wubgen Shig Rice, which is a duology that I have read this year and really enjoyed as well. It's just really good. It's an easy read. It's got 2 very different kind of settings. It has a main character that you root for and you understand the trials and the tribulations. And then there's really great discussions about, working as a community to get through hardships, but then how eventually people just don't want to do that anymore. And it's so funny because this book was published in 2016, and it really reminded me of the start of the pandemic, when people were trying to come together and you were being really supportive of your neighbors, but ultimately people just started to be more focused on themselves, and society just wanted to get back to normal times. But other people were really anyways, I don't want to get all political, but you know what, I think you would understand what I'm saying, where some people were really resistant to change and other people were really accepting of change during that time. And you can see that discussed in this book, and I think it's discussed really well. Anyways, big thumbs up. Really enjoyed. Definitely recommend. And I'm now very excited to move on to My Volcano, because so far this publishing house with this book and with Scarborough and with Butter Honey Pig Bread, I'm just really enjoying their literature that they're putting out. Let's have the last couple sips of this and get going on My Volcano. Let's do a quick update. I am at page 107 of this book. If you can hear noise in the background, I have food cooking. It's sizzling. And I am enjoying it. This is a weird little book. You are jumping from person to person very quickly. Chapters sometimes are only half a page long. And I'm not totally sure how it's all going to connect. But you're at an interesting point in the book where, so this volcano has appeared and it has basically destroyed New York City. And now there's a little bit of a time, like time jumps, or it's playing with time, it's playing with possibly multiple universes. I'm not totally sure where it's going to go. It's weird, but the more I'm reading it, the more I'm enjoying it. So I'll keep going. Also, today was the day I volunteered at the library, and one of the other books came in for me, so I got to pick that up today. That is Little Fish by Casey Plett. And this follows it's a book about a transgender woman, I believe. And she gets a phone call, and it turns out that possibly her Opa, who is a devout Mennonite farmer, might have been transgender himself. I'm not sure where it goes. It's looking like it's kind of similarly, kind of little vignettes or shorter kind of pieces of writing. And so I'm not sure what to expect from that one, but that one showed up. It will get read, hopefully, in this vlog. Possibly not. Like I said, I don't know how many I'm going to get to. But I am going to stick with this one and see where it goes, because it's a weird one, but it's entertaining me. We'll keep it up. Okay, another good morning. I started this vlog off with a really great book and was really hoping that momentum would continue. But I am struggling through this, and I have tried to pick up 2 other books on this TBR, and none of them are speaking to me. However, because that's 3 books and none of them are speaking to me, I think it's a me problem and not a book problem. I have decided that today the goal is going to be to just keep on keeping on with this book. I was thinking about DNFing it, but after going to 2 other books and really just not feeling them, I think that I need to continue to give this book a chance, especially since I am 135 pages in. So I'm just under halfway through this book, and I'm gonna keep giving it a chance. If I get to like page 200 and it's still not working for me, then maybe I will DNF, but I'll keep going. And the problem that I'm having with this book is just that there's clearly a message that's trying to be told through this book, and I'm not fully grasping what the point of that message is. It's a very weird book. Like, you are jumping from person to person, and you're playing with time, and there's so many different perspectives, and like sometimes people are bugs. Like, it's a very weird book, and those kind of books typically don't always work for me because, I don't know, I'm a reader that just likes to read and enjoy. I'm not always a reader that is looking to find the meaning in things. Like, I have no problem being a surface level reader. You know, I'm not looking always to find the academic side of things. And I feel like there is a big point at play in this book, and I'm not getting it. And I don't want to start looking at reviews and stuff right now because I just want to see what becomes of this book. When I'm done the book, I might do a little bit more research on what it's trying to say and what the meanings are, but I don't like doing that normally. So that's where I'm struggling with this book. I will talk about the 2 other books that I tried because I'm going to try them again. I'm going to, like I said, just kind of try to persevere because I think it's a me thing right now. But I do have time. I have the next couple of days off, and my only goal is I would like to work out. My workout schedule has gotten a little wonky, so whether that's just getting on my stationary bike or doing some yoga or getting the bike outside, taking my mountain bike out, I'm not really sure. But for this morning anyways, I'm gonna keep reading this. It's first cup of coffee of the day. And I'm gonna hope that things turn around because this vlog started with such a strong book, and I'm gonna be really kind of bummed if I don't find at least one more. But I have a couple more in the chute ready to go. So fingers crossed it turns around. Finished, and I am so glad I did, because this book, it's weird. Like, I'm gonna put it out there, it's weird. The following it can get a little confusing, but the writing is incredible and the storytelling is so unique, and the perspectives just offer a lot. And you do eventually, or for me it took a little bit, you do eventually realize what the conversation is about. And it's a book that just spirals. Like, it starts kind of slow and then it builds this momentum and it gets so fast, but the world kind of shrinks at the same time. And it's just a very unique book. I've never read anything quite like this before. And I thought that ultimately the payoff is so good, because it did take me a little bit, as you saw, to get into this, to know kind of what I was reading about and what the topics were. And I don't know, it's absolutely a book that I think would appeal to a pretty broad range of readers, particularly if you're into something that's just a little different. Now, it's not fast. It looks small, but like, it is text on text on text. There are occasional breaks, and it's really interesting where you get kind of crime stats from the year 2016. And why that's incorporated is also really interesting. So I don't have the most eloquent of way to talk about this book, but there are a couple of reviews that I think sum this book up really well. And I'm just gonna read a couple. I'll be really quick because I know reading off of a screen isn't entertaining for anybody, but I think that if you're on the fence about this book or curious about this book, I think these reviews kind of better encapsulate what the book is about. Okay. Stintsy explores cultural, geographical, personal, and emotional relationships. In tandem, themes of global society, technology, and the digital disconnect of modern life punctuate the book with a resonant insight. My Volcano is a gorgeous unpacking of what it means to live as the world changes around us in ways we don't always understand. So many balls are in the air, but the author juggles them beautifully. Stintsy's writing is crisp, quick and clear, and their imagination is extraordinary. I flew through this book. I actually really agree with that. When I was reading my confusion was not because the writing was confusing. My confusion was because I wasn't sure exactly what the point was. But it's true. There are so many perspectives and so many characters in this book, and yet never once did I feel like I was losing track of who was who and where it was. It was very clearly laid out, and I think that that in itself is an art and was done so very well. And this is going to be the last one. So somehow in writing about giant bugs and time travel and weird escape rooms and magical bees, Stintsy has hit on some essential truths about what it feels like to be a human on this bizarre, heartbreaking, ever-changing, impossible planet. I don't know. I was feeling bummed about this book, and I'm not anymore. I think that the turnaround and the way it wraps up and the way it's written is just, it's really, really well done. And I am so, so very glad that I stuck through with this book. The pacing, like I said, turns out it's really great, and there's a reason there are so many accolades about this book. And I am thrilled that I got to it, because it's one that I actually had seen the cover of before, but wasn't really into picking up, obviously, but I'm very glad that I was able to do so. I am now going to read one of my ebooks that I started or tried to start this morning in one of the three where I was like, oh no, am I DNFing everything? The one, what's it called? I'm going to start reading There Has to Be a Knife. And this is following a man who is really struggling with life. His ex-girlfriend committed suicide, and he's dealing with the aftermath of that and not really understanding or feeling responsible, even though they had been broken up for quite a while. And he's also very clearly got some pretty tough emotional damage. I'm not really sure if I'm describing it well, but he's very angry. He's a very angry individual. He's actually very challenging it's challenging to be in his head. And the writing of this book, while it's good, is a little, it moves really quickly, and sometimes a character is introduced, like you're supposed to just know who they are, and I don't know who they are, which for me can be a little challenging. Also, I mean, I read ebooks because they're all I have sometimes, and in this case, all I have access to is an ebook, but I always find, I don't know, sometimes the formatting on ebooks and stuff can be a little weird, and so I wonder if the physical reading of this book would be different. I don't have that option, so I'm going to give this one another shot. It was definitely a shorter book. It's like 135 pages on my e-reader, which obviously changes from person to person based on your font and stuff. But I'm going to continue on with that one and hope that, like this one, it gets better as I continue on. Fingers crossed. I have a couple of updates, and they are very positive ones. I finished There Has to Be a Knife by Adnan Khan. Yes, Adnan Khan, and turns out this is a really good book. So again, like I said, I was pretty sure it was a me problem yesterday, and it definitely was a me problem. I went back to There Has to Be a Knife, and it began to just be a really kind of, it's not sad, like cry sad, but just the main character is very self-destructive, and it's about him dealing with grief and trying to figure out his place in the world. It actually, in a very weird way, reminded me a little bit of Jamila Green Ruins Everything, if Jamila Green Ruins Everything wasn't political satire. If it was a more kind of just straightforward look at life. And I feel like this book is that. And the writing was really good, and the character was very frustrating to be with sometimes because he made some terrible decisions, but it was interesting because you really had no idea where the story was going to go. And it moves forward in a way that you could see happening, but it's all in like his head, and his thought process was both very frustrating, but also his circumstances were frustrating, so you understood. It was just done really well, and I had a great time. And then when I finished that book, I went on to Everything is Awful and You're a Terrible Person. Is that what it's called? Everything is Awful and You're a Terrible Person by Daniel Zamparelli. And this is a book of interconnected short stories. The one thing I liked about this, so I am not normally, like interconnected short stories aren't something that I read a lot of, normally because I don't really see the point, but they were short stories. I don't think anything was more than 12 pages long. They were really fun, and they had a lot of sharp and sarcastic humor, or it was just entertaining to read. And you started to see the interconnections. There were a couple of characters that showed up multiple times, and it's a bunch of queer stories about life and love and connections and relationships, and it was a very easy, propulsive read, and I enjoyed myself thoroughly, which means this vlog is going very well. The success rate has been quite high, and I think for the final book, going to read Little Fish by Casey Plett. I know that I was talking about reading the book Crossings by Betty Lambert, but I really want to read a physical book, and that the Crossings book I only have on as an ebook, and I just don't feel like reading on a screen right now. I want to read on a paper, read in a book. I don't want to be looking at a screen right now. So I'm gonna read this. I'm gonna hope that it continues to go well, because so far Arsenal Pulp Press, man, 2 thumbs up. Like, it's knocking things out of the park. It's just creating, it's just putting out literature that is, I think, really well written and has really great stories and unique perspectives, and I'm having a wonderful time. Let's hope it continues with this. What is this one about? Oh yeah, this is about the one where Wendy receives a phone call, and she learns a startling secret that her devout Mennonite farmer Opa may have been transgender himself, which I guess means that Wendy is transgender. We will find out how this goes. Last coffee, last book of this reading vlog, and we're going out on a bang because this is a very good book. I don't really remember what I said about this book previously. It's been a couple days since I finished. I just haven't been able to wrap this vlog up. But Wendy as a character, it's so funny because the synopsis talks about Wendy receiving an unexpected phone call, and then her kind of maybe thinking that her grandfather was hiding some things in his life. And that is definitely part of it, but it's definitely much more of a character study on Wendy than it is on kind of her trying to figure out and sort out her grandfather's life. And that is part of it, but it's really more about her as an individual and her kind of just dealing with life and transitioning and post-op and her relationships. There's a lot of dealing with coming to terms with who you are as a person, and when you're really needing to establish that who you were born and who you were meant to, and who you were born but who you are not the same person, and grappling with that growing up, and then dealing with that in a society that still very much is not very open necessarily to what it is to be transgendered, and it just looks at the story really well. I think for me it was a really great learning book, just in because it's such a like, I can't imagine what it would be like to just not know who you are and to not be who you were born to be. Like, that's not something I've ever had to grapple with. My gender, I was born female and I am female. Like, I've never even had to think about what it would be to not have that, and I think that could be a really challenging and painful experience. And so to read about this story, I think there's a lot of really great lessons in this book. And I don't know, like, the author doesn't need to make this a lesson book, right? Like, it's not about teaching society, right? I don't think, like, it's not this author's responsibility to teach people, but I think the way she wrote the story really does bring to the forefront what it would be like to have to go through this. And it was beautifully written. The story was really good. It's a painful story. It's a hard story to read sometimes because she's making decisions that, like, to me sound challenging, but she comes to terms with a lot of these decisions that she's okay with them, and they're just not things that I would ever want to do, but she's fine with it, and I found that to be really interesting. Massive truck coming up the road right now. And I just think it was done really, really well. Okay, so there is a quote on the back, and I'm just going to read it. There is a dark place most novels don't touch. If you've ever been there, maybe you know how exhilarating it can be to read a book like this, a book that captures the darkness so honestly, so accurately, that you can finally begin to let it go. Fearless and messy and oozing with love, Little Fish is a devastating book that I don't ever want to be without. And I just think it was such a good book. This has been a wildly successful reading blog, and it got a little rocky for a minute there, but turned itself around, and I am so thrilled. Like, all of the books that I read in this vlog, I would recommend. I think they all have merit. I think they all have such unique perspectives, incredible storytelling, great writing. I had such a good time with this. I think the Mercy Journals and this are my top two. I would say My Volcano and There Has to Be a Knife kind of tie for second, and third is Everything is Awful and You're a Terrible Person, I think is what it was called. But they were all, like, that's just if you had to rank them. I think that they were all so good, and I'm so thrilled to have read them. My reading has been weird, but this kind of felt like it finally kickstarted me back into the genres and the types of books that I typically like to read, and that makes me very, very happy. If you're still here, thanks for being here. Let me know if you've read any of these books, if you're interested in any of these books. I would love to do another small press reading vlog. If you know of any really unique and cool small presses, also let me know. I would love to look into them and see and if I can get my hands on anything. And I am going to go enjoy my day off with my husband, finish my coffee, start editing this at some point, and I'll see you in the next video.